After graduating from uni, I jumped into my first job working for a market research agency, and specifically in qualitative research. And it really started to answer some of my why questions that I had as a kid, helping me to understand the who, what, where, how, and why of consumer behaviour across a number of brands and also sectors. And I really learned a hell of a lot in my roles in those positions. And it also afforded me my first experience into operational management, where I set up a division within the business to drive efficiencies in the way that research was produced, before moving on to then heading up their corporate services space and helping to improve the way that the business functioned. After about 10 years, quick 10 years, I moved on and I jumped straight into tech in my first e-commerce role with Living Social, which then became acquired by the now Lux Group and Luxury Escapes. And since that time, I've been in tech and e-commerce. Originally started in a special projects role, working to drive efficiencies and operational improvements in the business, before jumping into some GM roles, heading up different product businesses, and then the COO of Lux Everyday, before now embarking on my new challenge with AWS. Careers are definitely a sprint. In multiple directions, sometimes competing directions, and that's just part of the game. I think what's really important in your learning journey in life and in your career journey as well is to take opportunities to get involved in areas that you might be interested in, because you never know where they'll lead you. My first opportunity was to develop an internal department which drove efficiencies in the business, and that came out of one of the MDs actually just speaking about a different idea at one of the company conferences. I then quickly got in touch with that MD and said, hey, I'm interested. What is this about? And before I knew it, I was developing and running a department. And that would not have happened if I didn't run towards it. But that sprint didn't stop there. I had a steep learning curve as to what it meant to actually drive and develop a department, including, recruiting the right sort of team, upskilling them, making sure that there were processes in place, implementing things into the wider business. And it was a steep learning curve before I then jumped into another space, which was around corporate services management. And as you can see, that these were opportunities that you have to grab onto, and that I, in that case, grabbed onto and rode with. There was no clear path, there was no rule book, and there never is. But it's really important to drive towards things that excite you and interest you, because you never actually know where they'll lead. So I definitely did it that first time, developing that department. I certainly did it the second time with regard to the corporate services management, a space that I'd never played in before, but it gave me exposure to the C-suite and strategy in particular, and working through operational excellence and also execution, which was a big tick in my space, because it then was a catalyst for where I would go to in the following part of my career, which was in e-commerce, and I ran really heavily towards that. It was an interesting space for me. I had no experience, but I wanted to be able to prove that I could contribute in a way, and that was a real open door for me in Living Social. And again, in e-commerce, being a completely different field, huge learning curve of sprint learning in a really short period of time, from everything from acquisitions to integrations to restructures. And that was a continuous curve that went round and around for about 6 months. So there's no smooth learning journey in one's career. There are opportunities to run towards things, or sprints as they've been referred to in this particular question. The best piece of career advice I was ever given is, don't allow my expectations to be somebody else's priorities. And what that really meant was that I needed to understand my role in working with others and stakeholders to actually get things done. And that's a really big place when you're talking about executing strategy and understanding that people come from things from very different angles. And in life, relationships, whether it be in a boardroom or across a meeting table or with one another, it could be with your team member, you as a team member. Always be really clear that everybody comes from things in very different spaces and very different mindsets. So the overlay to that is to be really clear with your communication and never leave a room without knowing where we all stand. The worst piece of career advice I was ever given was not to pursue additional education. I raised an opportunity to take some education on board, and I was discouraged to actually take that on board, that potentially my role wouldn't be able to afford me the additional time in my own time to actually get that done. That was a huge mistake and a huge piece of advice that did have an impact on me in the short term. Nevertheless, I went on to do it and was really happy with what I've done. So I think the second part of that is that continually learning, whether it be formal, informal, from others, from institutions, whatever it is, from our consumers, from each other, is super, super important, so that we evolve and that we also broaden our mindsets to understanding and continuously being better at what we can be. What I wish I knew when I started my career was to embrace every single opportunity that comes your way. There are going to be times when you're unsure, when you don't have all the answers, and sometimes you take a gamble and they pay off, and sometimes you'll take a gamble and they don't pay off. But both of those scenarios are very, very helpful in learning and growing as an individual. And whilst I did have many opportunities and I did take some of them, I wish I'd put my hand up for a couple of more and maybe stretch myself. So my mantra now is to actually just try to do the things that I'm interested in and that I want to go for, regardless of how technical my skills may be. I've got a lot of transferable skills to contribute in areas that can make positive impact, and I believe that everybody does, regardless of what seat you hold at the table. The biggest mistake I ever made is probably double-barreled. It was really a scenario early in my career that I felt a huge amount of responsibility to deliver, and I felt accountability to deliver, which is really, really important in every role. But what I mistook for delivery was overlooking asking for help when that was needed. So I think that understanding that others can contribute to your outcome, regardless of whether they're directly accountable for it or not, is a very important learning curve. And the second thing to that is that making mistakes are actually okay, and making mistakes actually provide fruitful outcomes of things that could have been better that you may not have seen before. And I think in combination of those two things, not asking for help and not willing to make mistakes early on in my career, meant that I had missed opportunities and meant that I had missed learning scenarios. So throughout time, we can get better at making mistakes and being okay with that. And I think a large part of that comes down to the culture in which you build around your teams, that mistakes are okay, they're going to happen, but we can work through them, most importantly, together. So when you can involve a team and when you can involve others in solutions is really, really important. But it's something that we need to remind ourselves, and I often do, every single day. I think what's really been key to my success is a couple of things, is that I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and figure things out. So initiative is a big thing that I look for in my teams, and I strive to improve in myself. You don't have to have all the answers, but you have to have a willingness and a mindset to kind of figure it out or find a solution. Go and talk to somebody who's been there, done that. Find a tool that can assist you along the way. So initiative has definitely been one thing, and the second part of that is also resilience. Because hard times are normal. They happen in everybody's career, in everybody's role, in every business, in every lifetime. And I think having the resilience to kind of work through tough times is really, really important. And when you can marry resilience with initiative, means that you can come through things positively, and so can your teams. But both of those are muscles, and we need to work at them. So the more that we can involve others in building our resilience and testing us when feeling uncomfortable is really important. And secondly, growing our mind so that when we are trying to apply our initiative and our want to do and contribute, means that we've got more tools on hand to actually get a positive outcome.